blah, blah, blah.
Blah, 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 blah.
Blah, blah. Which is very apt. You're listening to Diminished Returns, the podcast about sequels, prequels, spin-offs and reboots. I'm Chris Scott. And across from me is the man who never gave me a choice. It's Mr. Alan Johnson.
How do, pod people?
From the novel by Anne Rice. From Neil Jordan, the director of The Crying Game. Interview with the Vampire.
In this, the first instalment of our Vampire Chronicles double bill, we try to quench our insatiable thirst for blood and take our time to drink in the dark majesty of Interview with the Vampire from 1994, before we return next episode, as if risen from the grave, to worship at the altar of the sequel, 2002's Queen of the Damned. Both films draw from the literary works of Anne Rice, whose 1976 novel Interview with the Vampire has, as of 2008, sold an estimated 80 million copies worldwide. The book would sire over a dozen sequels and associated works, all expanding the mythos of the vampire. And while the film's rights were sold shortly after the publication of the first book, the project had lingered in development hell for years, until Warner Brothers, who now owned the rights, would approach Irish filmmaker Neil Jordan to direct after the huge international success of his 1992 film, The Crying Game. His art house leanings would give Interview with the Vampire a unique flavour, and so too would the novel's themes and the incredible star power of the cast: Tom Cruise, Brad Pitt, Antonio Banderas, Kirsten Dunst and Christian Slater, a late replacement for River Phoenix who had sadly passed away mere weeks before the film's production began. Anne Rice herself would provide the script, with Jordan doing uncredited rewrites, and an unlikely blockbuster was born. So frightening, it would scare Oprah Winfrey out of a screening early and ignite a subculture of vampiric cosplay, and become an important film for many LBGT+ viewers, due to its homoerotic themes stemming from Rice's own admission that no form of love between consenting individuals appears wrong. The film is a heady cocktail indeed for a mainstream Hollywood movie. So, dare you follow us into the dark catacombs of Interview with the Vampire?
Do you still want death? Or have you tasted it enough?
So yeah, we're going to be talking about Interview with the Vampire, of course, the first filmic adaptation of Anne Rice's work. Obviously, older viewers may remember Anne Rice from Challenge Annika. It's a very UK-based joke there for men of a certain age. So yeah, Interview with the Vampire. Alan, I hadn't seen this for years, probably since it came out in video. Mm-hmm. It's Tom Cruise as the vampire Lestat. Mm-hmm. He's a bad vampire. Then you've got Brad Pitt as Louis. He's a kind of good vampire.
Tortured, emo.
Yeah. And then you've got little Kirsten Dunst when she's but a bairn, and she's a baby vampire.
That's right. Because we know this is like the sitcom My Two Vampire Dads.
Yep.
About a same-sex couple raising a precocious preteen.
Absolutely. And that's, by the way, that's actually one of the things that I quite liked about it, is that watching this as a kid and just being like, it's just a big budget vampire movie. And now I'm like, it's obviously a gay love story where they have a family. And I mean, it's not even subtle, right? So 14, 15-year-old me, despite being obviously a proto-hipster and very, progressive.
Worldly, some might say.
Very much so. But, I wasn't exactly digging for subtext in my films. Whereas within 2 seconds, it's just like, this is about like just two dudes getting on. And I'm not going to lie, it was a very nostalgic feeling watching this film, because this was just like a huge budget mental film filled with movie stars, right? And in a kind of way that you only get those big budget filled with movie stars things when it's like a superhero thing now.
Yeah.
You very rarely get that kind of big budget spectacle thing of something that's not a superhero film, and they'll probably last maybe 5-10 years. Whereas this was like, do you know what's going to be the big super hit of the fucking year, and that will hopefully spin off loads of films? It's basically a gay love story between Tom Cruise and Brad Pitt. Once you get a little bit tired of those two absolute beefcakes, we'll throw in Antonio Banderas in the third act, right? And Hollywood went, yeah, that's going to be our fucking huge big film. And now I feel that, box office and things have probably become more of a science than an art. And if they made Interview with the Vampire today, it wouldn't be as mental. it wouldn't be as enjoyable. It wouldn't have the panache. And now, I'm not necessarily saying it's good, though I actually did really enjoy this film. But I enjoyed it because it is just all these brilliant people to get, like, Tom Cruise is a great actor, Brad Pitt's a great actor, Banderas.
Neil Jordan behind the camera.
Yeah, Neil Jordan is a brilliant filmmaker.
I love Company of Wolves.
Yeah, and I read, when I was reading about it after watching it, I always usually kind of go on Wikipedia, and I liked that Neil Jordan was just like, yeah, when I was reading it, I kind of went, I can just see the crazy theatricality of this. Kind of, he was basically just going, this sounded a bit mental, and I thought, this could be quite fun. And I thought, yeah, that's the exact right way to do this. Because basically, they've just fucked a whole load of movie stars into this brilliant, weird package. And did they care that any of the actors were staying on accent? No. No. Hey, Tom Cruise, what to do is every 8th line, try a French accent. But the rest of the time, just do whatever you want. Brad Pitt, New Orleans, whatever you do is close enough, right? You know, the accents in this film are all over the place, and it's Brooks like, yeah, you know, I don't want a true to life, realistic portrayal of vampires, you know, in the 18th century or whatever the fuck. I want it to be Tom Cruise playing Tom Cruise as a vampire. What did you think of the film in general?
In short, I thought it was overlong. There's such a lot of stuff happening at a pace that we're not familiar with these days, but it's filled with this sort of weird wonder. Like, there are amazing set pieces that are handled intelligently, and I think that's maybe what separates this a sort of cerebral quality to the goings on screen here.
It is big budget Hollywood meets a kind of weird art director, and neither side quite win, but it means that the thing that you get is this weird hodgepodge. Now, I've never read the books by Annika Rice, but yeah, Alan is showing this to me on the video call that we have, you know, but whenever I showed him something last week on video, it was all, please stop, my family might see this.
Personally, I don't particularly like this book, Interview with the Vampire, but I do like the quote on the back, and I quote, "One of the most wonderful, erotic, sensual books ever written by Sting."
Sting? There's a thing, right? There's a guy that pumped for like 20 hours and didn't come because he was into tantric sex and all that, right?
Tantric, baby.
This is the thing about Sting and his tantric sex bullshit. That's what happens when you're a millionaire rock star. You've not got other shit to do, right? You can spend 20 hours with you and your lover and be like, it doesn't matter about the housework because somebody else is doing it, right? If a man like myself has to do tantric sex, it's like halfway through I'll be going, I've got the dishes to do, I've left the washing in the machine, you know, this is my guarantee to any of the ladies. And listen, any of the fellas, in case a lifestyle change happens, I'm not ruling it out, right? But anybody out there that ends up living their dream of having sex with me, Chris, the host of Diminished Returns podcast, if you get to live that dream, I promise you one thing: in, out, job done. That's the Chris guarantee. Do you know what I mean?
1 million customers served.
That's it. We've all got things to be doing. I take it very much a kind of Fordist production line style of shagging.
You don't take the Neil Jordan theatrical approach, no?
No, but I'm also very bad at accents when I'm doing it. So, you know, yeah, if you want, I will do my Man of 1,000 Voices when we pump, but I will only get to about 4. Basically, Tom Cruise is the vampire Lestat who bites Brad Pitt's neck, because Brad Pitt is this sad, lonely man who wishes for death. You see, he wishes for death because his family have died, and he's wandering around New Orleans, just like looking all sad and shit. And Tom Cruise is, like many people in the 90s, looked at Brad Pitt and went, I'll take some of that, please. So he's like, oh, you wish for death? I'm going to bite you, and then go, do you really want to die, or do you want to live forever? And he's like, give me that Queen song, I want to live forever. And Brad Pitt and Tom Cruise, are vampires together. But here's the thing, Brad Pitt seems to be totally blindsided by the whole you need to drink blood to survive thing. And Brad Pitt's like, I'm not killing people because I'm a moral person and I'm mortal. And Tom Cruise is like, you're going to need to get to grips with this. And Brad Pitt's like, no, I'll kill rats, I'll kill chickens, I'm not eating human people, because Brad Pitt is a moral human being. What he does is just sit next to Tom Cruise while he kills people.
That's it.
Like, the whole film, he's like, nope, that's out of order. And Tom Cruise is like, cool, I brought a bird back that I'm going to kill. And Brad Pitt's like, well, I will stand 3 yards away to show you how upset I am. I mean, I'm not going to stop you killing people. No. He's moral, but only, like, he doesn't want to get involved. He's very much an isolationist. Brad Pitt is like the Stop the War Coalition. He's the Donald Trump and Jeremy Corbyn of this new isolationist left. That's what Brad Pitt represents in this film. Is that what Neil Jordan wanted in his script? Almost certainly not, but there we go.
He's like the person that you go out to dinner with and you're like, do you want fries? And they're like, no, no fries. And then you get fries.
Yeah, and then the net point.
And they want some.
Yeah, absolutely. They're the person that never smokes unless they're out drinking, and they never buy their own pack. They're always just like, there's tap a fac or something. Absolutely ridiculous. But again, I love that the film, and I assume the book is like, see, because he's the moral one, right? He's a good guy. He's conflicted about the awful things that he allows to happen. So it sets up, Lestat's just the guy who's like, fuck it, I'm all in the vampire thing. It's great. Killing people is awesome. And Brad Pitt's all like, maybe killing people is bad, but not bad enough for me to actually do anything about it. It's a real duality of man there.
And of course, the whole story's framed with Vampire Brad recounting the tale of his life to journalist Christian Slater in modern day San Francisco.
Brad Pitt has taken Christian Slater up to his hotel room, and again, the woman of the 90s must have been so gutted that it was just for an interview. It's because that's just, again, it's just like, hey, come on, girls, this is you're going to enjoy this. Straight women and gay men. And I'm not going to lie, again, Christian Slater was pretty good. We all enjoyed cuffs. We all enjoyed gleaming the cube. Christian Slater probably should have had a better career.
In the most recent season of Dirty John, he's very good.
He was also excellent in Mr. Robot recently, and he's really good in Archer. So it's basically the film's sort of framing device is it's Brad Pitt recounting his life, or not his life, his death, his after death, his whatever you call it when you get made a vampire, to Christian Slater as an interview. So obviously this is like you're taken back to this sort of 18th century slave times in New Orleans. So Lestat, Tom Cruise is a bit older and was obviously kind of meant to be like a sort of French, Regency dandy type person. So he's got that kind of golden, wavy Goldilocks hair.
Yeah.
And then of course Brad Pitt, he's got the sort of long hair of the period. And by the period, I mean the early 90s. He looks like he's about to start singing More Than Words by Extreme. It just looks like he's the guitar player in a kind of slightly pop metal band that's about to do a ballad and finally get on top of the pops.
A Mr. Big covers band.
Yeah, I mean, that's just what it looked like the whole thing. Like, I didn't go, oh, that's a guy from old-timey New Orleans. I just went, that guy was in Extreme or whatever.
I mean, but say what you will about vampirism and its lifestyle, but it looks like it's really good for your hair. It's like, take 2 bottles into the shower. I just vamp and go. Like, really big, thick, lustrous, shiny hair.
Yeah, I mean, that's it. If you've got sort of, the sort of flaccid roots that I have, then it does look appealing. It does look appealing. And I also like a lie-in, so I think vampirism might be the shout. This film is just filled with like lots of pale makeup, wigs, contact lenses,
felt hats, velvet coats.
Oh, I mean, great costume design. Brad Pitt also kills a dog, so that's a laugh.
Brad Pitt just starts like setting shit on fire in this movie, and he loves it. Like he burns down his plantation, he burns down Tom Cruise, he burns down a theatre. He's properly pyro. It's amazing.
This is the thing I loved about this. It starts off, they're in New Orleans, he's newly vampire, and Tom Cruise is like, listen man, start eating people and killing people. It's fucking brilliant. And Brad Pitt's all like, no, I'm not going to do it. But they still live in his big, rich plantation, right? And the slaves in the plantation seem to know that there's something going on. Probably because he keeps eating all the animals on his plantation. I mean, he's not exactly hiding it. He goes into this big chicken coop and kills all the chickens and drinks their blood, and then leaves the evidence just sitting there. And it's like, Brad, people are going to figure this out, you fucking idiot. And then the house slave is Thandie Newton, right? Which obviously great because her and Tom Cruise will get to star in one of the best films ever made, Mission Impossible 2, a previous episode of Diminished Returns. Please check it out. But, Thandie Newton is like the house slave, and she's, and again, fair play to Thandie Newton, she's a proper actress. She's like, you want me to do a Creole accent? I'm doing a Creole accent, and it's good. There's none of this fucking bullshit that the two male leads are doing here, where it's just, a kind of half in and an accent.
Yeah, Tom sees everybody in britches and thinks they're back and far and away, and he's just like, oh, begorra, I'd be sure.
To be sure the blood's great, take a bit of blood. You will, won't you? You will, won't you?
I like how Brad decided to atone for his character owning slaves in this film by producing and starring in 12 Years a Slave Later, where he's an abolitionist. You're like, oh yeah, trying to absolve yourself of a little bit of white man's guilt there, Brad, from previous on-screen slave ownership.
Of Interview with the Vampire Guild. So Thandie Newton's like, dead worried about her master, and Brad Pitt eventually cracks and bites her and is like, no, I've taken her life, and he runs out to the slaves and he goes, you're all free men, I am the devil, run, I am the devil. And it's like, wow, he's such a great guy, he's freed those slaves. Hey, wait a minute, Brad Pitt had slaves for the whole time up until he started biting them. He was super fine with having slaves. And now we're meant to be like, oh, well done. You finally freed your slaves. I'm aware that it was a different time and blah, blah, blah. What I love is that they were meant to feel heroic for the guy for finally letting them go.
Yeah, I've stopped brutally oppressing people.
Yeah.
Dehumanising them.
Bare minimum, Brad. Bare minimum is not eating your slaves, number one. Number two, not having slaves. And in fact, number two solves number one, right? Hey, it's really hard to eat slaves you don't fucking have. In fact, if you were that worried about your slaves, this moment you were like, Jesus, really hungry for human beings. I seem to have a good 100 or so human beings living on my property. I'm sure that'll be fine. I'm sure at no point I'll be overtaken by my ravenous hunger that I can't control. I'll just leave these poor innocent people to be kicking about here. Again, though, for the purposes of the film, he's the good guy. And also because Tom Cruise is just... And I was thinking this as I was watching this. Tom Cruise playing bad guys is brilliant. He should do it more often. Because Tom Cruise is, despite everyone knowing Tom Cruise really is Ethan Hunt, the greatest hero of all time, and I'm always playing these kind of heroic characters, Tom Cruise's skill set is so perfectly tuned to being a bad guy.
Tom Cruise, as a person, is clearly convinced that he is a superior being. But where Tom is always at his best is where awesome Tom Cruise gets out of his own road. That's when he's brilliant. But I've got to be honest, I have real trouble with awesome Tom Cruise.
I mean, apart from the Mission Impossible movies, which are some of the greatest films ever made. Come on. Yeah, Ethan Hunt, right? But if he's so good at being a bad guy, because Tom Cruise in real life is unhinged and a sociopath, right? And probably, I don't know, but he's really good at it, right? Well, I wouldn't say that this is necessarily a good performance acting-wise in the sense of, his accent's all over the shop, the tone's all over the shop. And if we're judging a performance purely on how much fun I'm having watching this guy do this, this is a 10 out of 10. This is like give him a million Oscars, because Tom Cruise is like, I'm playing a bad guy who loves to kill and eat people, and not only does he love it, he loves telling other people about how good... Like, how there's that hacky thing about vegans keep talking about being vegans? Well, actually, Tom Cruise is like that guy for vampires, because he's just like, this is fucking great. Why aren't you doing this? Kill and eat people. It's awesome. And, he's having such fun.
Yeah, it's good to see him just attack a role with relish. It's brilliant. Really get his teeth into it. Wah, wah.
But, and he's got lines like that, and everything in this film is kind of pitched to 10. Like, Brad Pitt isn't just sad. He's like mopey drippy, I'm unhappy. And then, Tom Cruise is the opposite.
Yeah, but how do you fix a relationship that isn't working?
You get yourself a save the relationship vampire.
Exactly, because having a baby's going to fix this.
How did that work for you, Alan?
Well, still vamping out.
It's working better for you than it is your missus.
But so here we are, like Tom and Brad. The happy home life that they had been living is now a bit fractious.
And so they do that kind of cliche thing of like Tom Cruise is like, I'm going to make him stay by having a baby. And of course it's not really a baby, it's a whatever 10-year-old Kirsten Dunst who they make into a vampire. But while he's with this, right, so Brad Pitt then walks round to like the plague area.
The plague's hit New Orleans.
If you can imagine some sort of virus that's hit the whole place, it's probably hard to imagine right now. But he goes to this sort of plague area, and Kirsten Dunst there with her mum who's dead, and Brad Pitt's like, oh no, this poor lassie, mum's dead. And then I think she like hugs him, and he's like, blood, and he can't control himself. He fucking bites little 10-year-old innocent Kirsten Dunst.
I don't know whether his thinking is that he'll put her out of her misery because he knows that heartbreak of losing your family.
Yeah, but it seems pretty weird that you've been very against killing people, and then the one that you break is like a 10-year-old lassie. Like, it feels like to me, like, Brad, I hate breaking it to you, pal, but you could have killed like some old people who were close to them, you know. But he's like, well, fuck it, if I'm breaking my duck, can we get a young, innocent girl whose mum has just died? That's the one to fucking murder. And go big or go home. Because that's, you know, that's it. Nobody's going to respect you if you kill a bunch of old people, Brad Pitt. Nobody respects Harold Shipman. Harold Shipman isn't getting a sexy Netflix documentary made about him. You know why? Because he killed old people. 10-year-old kids, Brad Pitt. Smart. Get your name in the fucking lights. I mean, just a brilliant, like, this is the good guy in this film has basically owned slaves and killed a 10-year-old child.
And a dog.
And a dog. He's not the worst one. And you're like, okay. I mean, you're right, I guess.
Honestly, my favourite bit in this movie is just where like Tom Cruise comes in and does a little waltz with Kirsten Dunst's newly dead mother. And dances around the room with this like terrible special effect doll just flopping around. That in a microcosm is the tone of this film. Yeah. Tom Cruise is dancing with a corpse.
It's absolutely beautiful. So he's obviously like, oh shit, I've killed this lassie. And Tom Cruise is like, have you? Because what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn her into a vampire and then we'll have a child. You know, that'll mean that you've got your family, you've got a family back, and we can live happily ever after, literally ever after, because they're immortal, with no thought of any sort of complications. He then turns 10-year-old Kirsten Dunst into a vampire, and then they basically play happy families for a while, where she goes to sleep in Brad Pitt's coffin when she's scared. Adorable little vampire. I mean, she also kills people all the time, but she's an adorable little vampire. You know, and Tom Cruise, he gets her a piano teacher, she kills him. He gets somebody to make her a dress, she kills her. Kirsten Dunst in this film is just like this murderous 10-year-old child. And what I love about it is like they do it immediately. When she's a vampire, she's like, I'm fucking super hungry. Let's start killing cunts.
What's your problem, Brad?
Yeah, she's just like, why is this mopey bastard? You know, at one point she laughs at him because he used to not kill humans.
Yeah, did you eat rats, Louis? Once, a long time ago.
I mean, honestly, that accent's better than any of the accents in that film. I also love the fact that now that Brad Pitt has played him, you know, he's actually still the most monstrous Louis in showbiz history. So, and it's quite smart in the sense of, you know, a kid doesn't understand morality for a large part. You know, they don't have that part of their brain undeveloped. So, of course, you turn this child into a vampire at 10. It's just going to be like, yeah, cool, I'm fucking eating people. I don't give a fuck. And it's glorious. I mean, I was all in for this. Just a hilarious child murderer in the good way. When I say child murderer, not somebody who murders children, but a child who is a murderer, which is, in this film, 100% hilarious. It's just so much fun.
But like all things, the child doesn't solve the relationship. It doesn't hold them together. And so inevitably the relationship's back on the rocks. And how do you deal with that now? Well, Kirsten Dunst and Brad Pitt decide to just off Lestat. You know, he's the problem.
Basically, Kirsten Dunst realises she's never going to grow old.
Yeah.
And again, this is a thing that actually happens in a big budget film. Is Kirsten Dunst sees a woman with cracking knockers, right? Like a grown woman with cracking tits, and she goes, you know, I've been alive for 30 years. How come I'm not looking like that? And they have to explain to her that she's never grown old, right? It's quite dark and weird and creepy like this whole film. But also, the main thing is, when that was happening, I was going, it's taking you 30 years, love. Yeah. To figure this one out and to start asking these questions. 30 years. Like, I'll be honest with you, Hen, you obviously weren't the brightest. You growing older wasn't probably going to help because you're not that fucking sharp, love. It's taking you 30 years to go, I have looked the exact same age for 20 years. That's fucking strange. Is it 30 years? Is she 30 years older or is it 30 years since she got turned? In which case she's 40. In which case, that character's the same age as me now. And I'm stupid, but I understand about people growing up. Like, I figured that one out for a solid couple of decades.
This is the point when I really began to empathise with her because I was a late bloomer too.
You do, to be fair, have cracking tits. So, Kirsten Dunst and Brad Pitt, they're gonna off Tom Cruise. So there's a rule in this Anne Rice universe, the Anne Rice-averse.
The Vampire Chronicles of Riddick.
Yeah, it's called the Vampire Chronicles, isn't it? These series of books. Brilliant. It's so fucking cool. So there's a rule that vampires, when they kill people, if you drink somebody's blood, you can drink it up until they die, but if you drink the last drop as their heart stops, somehow, and it's not explained, you drink their death and you die as well.
Yeah.
And again, you're like, Chris, that seems a bit woolly. The film is incredibly vague. Interview with the Vampire explains the rules of vampirism much like I would if I was trying to not say that I've done something wrong to a girlfriend of mine. Where I'm like, well, I guess, if you look at it one way and, did I forget to mention that? Oh, I'm sorry. It's just very weaselly about the rules. But basically, it fucks you up if you drink a dead person as they die. Which I've got a lot of questions about that, to be honest. Because does that mean, can you freeze it? Right, you're still alive now. Pop some blood in a little, a container. Stick that in the freezer, and that's fine. But if you took the bit where they die, that bit of blood, and you drank that later, would it kill you? There's questions all over the shop.
It might be like driving a car when it's very low in fuel, because that's when the fuel starts to fling up all the sort of debris and stuff that's inside the fuel tank and put that through the engine, so it's bad for the car. So it could be toxic blood so the last blood, the blood that comes out your feet, because that's at the bottom. That's how circulation works, right, isn't it? Yeah. So it's the blood at your feet is the last blood to come out your neck when they soak on you. And feet blood's bad for vampires, I guess.
Don't drink toe blood.
Exactly.
Tough for vampire food fetishists. So basically, Kirsten Dunst, she poisons these two people and makes out like she's just got them drunk.
They look like they're sleeping, but she gave them laudanum and they overdosed.
Yeah, right. And Tom Cruise drinks them and he's all like, help, I'm melting. He doesn't say I'm melting, but it's kind of, he's,
pitch-wise, it's exactly the same.
Exactly. This film looked at The Wizard of Oz and went, I don't think it's camp enough. This is like 12 Angry Men compared to Interview with the Vampire. So he's all like, get me back to my coffin. So I guess that would have helped. Again, the rules aren't clear. But basically, it's killing Tom Cruise. And then she, cut his throat.
Dead blood, throat slit, and then dump his body in the swamp.
They dump him in a swamp, and you're thinking to yourself, guys, he's literally a vampire. Just stick him out for the morning.
In the sunshine?
Aye.
Like your finished milk bottles, just stick them out on the doorstep.
Job done. But no, what we're going to do is hide him from the sun and put him in a dark, dank swamp where I'm sure there's no chance of him coming back. And again, this is why I respect this film, because they don't make you wait. He's literally back the next scene, right? But he looks even groovier. He kind of looks all skeleton-y and stuff, and it looks pretty cool. I'm a skeleton. And at that point, they fucking burn them. And that's brilliant. And then he does that cool vampire thing that they do in horror movies where he runs up the walls and the ceiling and stuff, but he's on fire. It looks fucking great. This film looks cool as fuck. Yeah. It's all fucking gothic lighting, really nice sets, costume design, Tom Cruise fucking overacting, and then at some point is on fire and crawls up the ceiling. That's what you want in a film. And he's like, I'm burning. And then Brad Pitt and Kirsten Dunst are like, see ya, wouldn't want to be you, we're fucking off in a boat to France. Brad Pitt's always like, I've always wanted to go there. I don't think he's ever really brought it up anywhere else, because he was wanting to kill himself at the start of the film. So
maybe that's what he was saying at his wife's grave, is just like, I can't live without you, my son. But I've never seen Paris.
Yeah, he's obviously got the money, he's got a fucking huge plantation. But listen, right, they fucking burn him, they burn the house, and Brad Pitt and Kirsten Dunst are like, see ya, wouldn't want to be you, we're fucking out here, we're great. I'm so glad they escaped Tom Cruise. And the important thing is that our two heroes are on a boat. Oh, by the way, the fact that they've set their whole house on fire, then that spreads to the whole entire of New Orleans, and the whole of New Orleans pretty much burns down as they leave in the boat. And they do not give a fuck. Again, the hero of our... Brad Pitt is just like, well, glad we got out of that one. As literally, in the background, the whole city is burning. The whole port is fucking burning down. And they don't care.
It's just the 18th century version of walking away from an exploding helicopter into the camera.
But what about the fucking thousands of people that are dying in this fire right now? Nope. Going to see Paris. Always wanted to see Paris. Such a romantic city. Yeah, get a baguette. That's what they call it. It's a big bit of bread. Isn't that interesting? What's that? You couldn't hear me because of the screams of the thousands of people burning to death in the background. I said baguette. Baguette. I'll tell you later, Kirsten Dunst. You're gonna love it. Mental. That is played as just an aside that this whole city's burning down. It may sound like I'm saying this as if it's a criticism. It is not. This is fucking brilliant. It's these two assholes just being like, yeah, we got what we wanted, and killed the whole city. So they then go to France.
Louis wants to find out more about the heritage of vampires.
Aye.
He wasn't getting that from Tom Cruise. Tom Cruise wasn't making with enough of the old chat.
Tom Cruise was withholding information. He's like, who made you? What's happened with vampires? How did this all start? Where's the other vampires? Brad Pitt is like your annoying aunt who suddenly gets into genealogy and is like trying to do a family tree. So basically, Brad Pitt and Kirsten Dunst going, let's just call it National Vampires European Vacation.
I like it when their coffin gets stuck on the Arc de Triomphe and they just keep going round and
Yeah. Holiday road. But so they finally in France, and that's where they meet the Theatre de Vampires. Yeah, that's right. The only worst thing than vampires is actors.
a theatre troupe of the cunts.
That's it. It's just like, oh, brilliant. Theatre vampires. Christ, they're going to be crushingly boring. You know, vampires are already self-obsessed. And so this is where you get Antonio Banderas, Stephen Rea.
And Stephen Rea does that like flappy vampire-y thing when he's mimicking all the moves of Brad Pitt and he flounces upside down. Oh my God, I wanted to tear my eyes out. Just like...
Yeah, basically when two vampires meet for the first time and they don't know each other, you're like, what cool vampire shit is going to happen? And basically this film does a little riff on the Marx Brothers mirror gag with Harpo. And again, I understand why that's a frustrating choice, but I did not expect that to happen. I did not expect them to spend 2 minutes in this vampire movie doing old Marx Brothers riffs.
Got your nose, Brad.
You know, I'll leave you in a minute or a minute and a half. So basically there is a theatre troupe of vampires.
I guess it's in the tradition of the Grand Guignol.
Definitely a kind of riff on the Grand Guignol tradition of these sort of gory theatre things they used to have in France, but it's like, oh, but what if this actually did have real people being murdered, right? But again, it's just like a really kind of pulpy, dumb idea. Will we show that show and get to meet a bunch of effete French fucking mime vampires? Yes, we will. And of course we're going to do that, Chris. Why would we not have fucking weird mime vampires? So basically Antonio Banderas is their kind of leader. Armand, he's basically like, come on Brad Pitt, come hang out. He basically kind of makes it clear that he wants Brad Pitt to hang out with him. Again, by hang out, I mean the sexual tension here is unbearable. Do you know what I mean? It's, you go to Europe, you meet some swingers. We've all done it.
It's because it's a weird thing. Like, obviously, vampires don't reproduce through having sex. Sex doesn't seem to be like an act that they partake in, but they definitely want to have romance and excitement and good times. And so, obviously, they reproduce their numbers through this like intimate act of biting and sharing each other's fluids. Like, the whole thing is so steeped in like weird sex stuff.
And again, I mean, I know like this goes back very much back to the book Francis Ford Coppola's Dracula, and we're not saying anything new here. You know this whole idea of the vampire is this sort of weird like sublimated gay thing. You know, it's about this guy turning another man into something that he that's shunned by society and is intimate with this other guy, and he's European, which always seems a bit more gay. It is brilliant. I mean, that's why it works. It's why these things work, is because you can apply these sort of metaphors and symbolism and themes and subtext to these things. It's great. And so Antonio Banderas is kind of like to Brad Pitt, I want you to come and be my main guy, because if you live for as long as I have, you need to have somebody who's new, who understands the new world. I'm an old guy, and you've only recently been made a vampire, so you'll be able to help me navigate this new world, right? It's very much the vampire equivalent of Alex Ferguson changing up his assistants all the time when he was the manager at Man U. Like, basically Brad Pitt is the Carlos Queiroz of Vampire World to Antonio Banderas' Sir Alex Ferguson. Oh, I metaphor closer to home. You are the old guy in this relationship. I am very much the Brad Pitt of Diminished Returns, and I will stick by that. So he's like, oh, I really want you, but he's like, but what about my daughter? And he's like, not really that bothered about it. I don't really want a kid. A kid's gonna fucking mess things up. Kids are a pain in the arse. And I get your pain there, Antonio.
Well, I mean, if we're carrying on this dynamic, Brad's got a child from a previous relationship. Antonio Banderas doesn't really want reminded of that. It's a lot to buy into to like take on a new relationship with someone who has an existing child.
I mean, for Antonio Banderas, he's dealing with a bunch of actors who are already worse than children. All actors are worse than children. And also as well, Antonio Banderas is like, look, just you being you isn't enough. It needs to work for me. What he's saying is, so you're Brad Pitt. That don't impress me much. Thank you. But yeah, I mean, the theatre show itself, by the way, the Grand Guignol kind of theatre show, is brilliant because I can see how it was popular, right? Because sure, this theatre show is a bit hokey, and they kill someone, but you also got to see some boobs and bush. Nowadays, obviously, we can see boobs and bush whenever we want. I mean, for a theatre ticket price, that was probably a good deal. Sure, she's murdered. I'm not saying she should have been murdered, but I can see why it had a good run.
The weird thing about the theatre show is that the audience are watching a troupe of real vampires pretending to be fake vampires, killing someone on stage under the guise of that being a fake death, because it's all part of the show.
Beautiful.
The internal logic of that whole thing is so mad.
Wheels within wheels. I find this all just to be quite enjoyable and ridiculous. And enjoyable because it's ridiculous. I think a more sober version of this film would be really dull.
Absolutely turgid. It would be awful. Could you imagine if it took itself seriously and how po-faced and leaden that would be if everybody was just earnest and meant everything?
Yeah.
I would much rather have this version where there's just loads of acting happening.
Yeah, there's loads of everything happening in this film. Everything is happening all at once. So Brad Pitt's like, oh, listen, I've got a kid. And then Kirsten Dunst, unbeknownst to him, pulls what I like to call a vampire parent trap. So she basically gets a woman and goes, we're going to turn you into a vampire and you'll be like my companion. And then basically Brad Pitt's like, what? Why do you want this? And she shows him a little picture of obviously a dead kid in a locket. She's got a picture of her child who we now infer is dead, right? But she doesn't have a picture of like the kid's corpse. That would be weird, right? But she's like, oh, I've got a locket, and it's obviously like, oh, see, she's lost a child, and now Kirsten Dunst is forever going to be a child, and therefore she can then forever be her mum. Oh, I can kind of see why somebody might in the throes of grief. That kind of makes sort of story logic. But my problem with that scene, how did Kirsten Dunst get? Is she like walking on the streets going, anyone got a dead kid? Anyone got a dead daughter looks kind of like me? Does this make you feel sad? Is it because I look like a dead daughter? No, I'm very sorry. How did this come up? But, hey, movie logic. And then this woman's like, I want to be made a vampire. And Brad Pitt's again dead, like, despite the fact he's happily killed loads of people in the 100 years that this has been going on. He's like, but why would you want this? And then she's like, shows him the locket. And then he's like, right, okay. And he turns to Kirsten Dunst and he's like, if I do this for you, then we're done. This is us. This is me repaying my debt. And again, Brad Pitt, you've just found yourself a nice bit of European action. And you're like, yeah, can I get rid of my daughter? Can I just patch her off to someone else who I just met? And I'm like, what would be great? If I had no baggage, I could fuck about with Antonio Banderas for a while. No, I mean, I get it. He's early 90s Antonio Banderas. I mean, he's a fucking good-looking boy, right? He's just like, I'm patching the kid. And so he bites this woman. Literally, like, 2 seconds later, the actor vampires come in. Oh, no. It's the worst kind of vampires. Vampires that are good with scene work. And these actor vampires come in, they grab them. They're obviously like, well, Antonio Banderas is going to dump us for Brad Pitt. Fair play. So all these theatre vampires are like, no chance. I don't want this, right? And he thinks he's killed another vampire. So they come rushing in and they grab Kirsten Dunst, Brad Pitt, and this new woman that we've just met. They basically fuck Kirsten Dunst and this new woman into like a kind of, I don't know, a dungeon, but it's got a big skylight. The whole point is that they fuck them in there, and then when the sun comes out, that'll fucking kill them. And Brad Pitt, they're like, we're going to put you in a coffin and nail it shut, and you'll be there forever, and you're going to go mental.
Yeah, wall you in.
And he's like, what? So, they're in there, and they get burned to death, and, it's the charred remains of this woman we've just met holding Kirsten Dunst, like it's her daughter, sort of based on that kind of, these scenes from Hiroshima and all that. Really pretty brutal. But Banderas is like, don't worry, I'm here to save the day. And he saves Brad Pitt, the guy I want to kind of vampire pump. Again, subtext. And Brad Pitt's fucking raging. He's like, I can't believe they killed my daughter that I was quite ready to patch for the rest of her life, which is forever. Like, 5 minutes ago, he was just like, right, damn this woman's soul to hell. Stuff this weekend's nonsense. I'm not going to take you for alternative weekends. I'm not going to go bowling. Like, you stay with your new mum. Me and Antonio Banderas are going travelling. But now he's raging. And he basically goes back to the theatre, right? And under the theatre is the kind of catacombs where all the vampires
like, all theatres have their own catacombs, right?
Yeah.
I mean, the King's in Glasgow's got, like, one of the most famous catacombs in the world. Yeah.
You always have dressing room, there's the green room, the sound booth, and the catacombs for vampires. Yeah, it's the main areas of any theatre, right? Front of house, stalls, balcony, vampire catacombs. Yeah, it's classic theatre stuff, right? That's the problem with your more modern entertainment complexes, is that the vampire catacombs are so soulless. They don't have the history. But
The acoustic treatment isn't the same.
Terrible. You know, you suck somebody's blood and you're hearing it bounce off the back wall. You know, it's really more for the entertainment set part rather than the sound part. I love that we are just criticising the Glasgow Hydro. It's fucking brilliant.
Nobody knew until you said.
I know. But just for people outside of Glasgow, they're like, yeah, I mean, they're probably everywhere, but we are specifically criticising the Glasgow Hydro. But so Brad Pitt's like, fuck this. So he goes into the vampire catacombs while they're sleeping and is just like, you fucking killed my daughter, who I wasn't that keen on, but this is about respect, right? And he, you know, like, I could slag off my daughter, but you guys, right? He then basically gets effectively old-timey gasoline.
It's been 10 minutes since Brad Pitt's burnt anything down in this movie, so he just like goes mental.
The firebug Brad Pitt in this film is just like, fuck it. He gets some, like, I don't know, gasoline or oil or whatever. I keep saying gasoline, but was gasoline a thing in the 1800s?
Kerosene,
yeah. So he's getting, like, whatever it is, kerosene or whatever, oil, and he pours it all over the vampire's, you know, lair, and he sets it on fire. And that's really cool because then he's like some of the vampires burn in their coffin, some of them kind of can get out and they're on fire. And Brad Pitt's just standing there with a scythe because there's a scythe lying about somewhere. He's picked up and he's just fucking decapitating motherfuckers, right?
See when he chops Stephen Ray in half?
And then it goes to a model of him falling. It looks great.
Yeah, Stan Winston, Creature Shop, doing the effects there.
It looks fucking brilliant, right? So he does this and he's fucking like chopping them all up and all that shit. And it's like, this is a really cool gruesome scene. And it's like, Brad Pitt's like, I am not playing here. So he's just like murdering them all. And it's a pretty cool scene. He basically straight up murders a whole bunch of actors, which is always fun. He's killed more actors than Charles Manson's family. Too soon? Jesus. So, and then he goes back to Banderas after this, and he's kind of like, you knew I was going to do this, and like, what's the deal with the whole vampire thing? And Banderas is just like super vague again, isn't he? He's just like,
he's
fucking shit happens. Maybe we'll explain this in a later movie. And it's like, you're not getting a direct sequel to this, but you are getting a sequel that has none of the original cast. And that film, we'll try and explain it, but we'll get to that. And then he's like, oh, alright, well, fuck this noise. I'm out of here. Suckers.
Yeah.
Literally bloodsuckers. And he's like, fuck it, I'm going back to America. So he goes back to America. And they have, again, a really cool scene of Brad Pitt watching films with sunrises in them, so he gets to see the sunrise for the first time in like 200 years.
It's a bit like Cinema Paradiso when there's just the edited sequence of all the kisses.
Yeah. Anyway, Interview with the Vampire, Brad Pitt is just like, he sees all these films with sunrise, he's like, I've got to see the sunrise first time, and it's like, there's a wee tear. And it's like, again, slave owner, killed a child, killed a dog, burned down a city, right? And then turned a woman into a vampire so that he could fuck off with Antonio Banderas. But he's so flighty, after about 5 minutes he's like, I don't even want to fuck Banderas anymore. He's a monster. We shouldn't be feeling sorry for him.
What I liked most about the cinema sequence with Brad was that obviously he's in the 18th century with Antonio Banderas, and then he's just like, says to Christian Slater, and then, you know, I just bumbled around, came back to America, and it was the 1980s all of a sudden. And then you see him coming out of the cinema and he's just been to see Tequila Sunrise.
Yeah.
It's a bit like The Simpsons when they go to see The Naked Lunch.
Two things wrong with that title, absolutely. Because it's like, Tequila Sunrise, there's going to be loads of shots of tequila and shots of sunrise. I can't wait. But it made me laugh, just like you, like, he's going to see Tequila Sunrise. It's just anything that says sunrise in it, you know. Danny Boyle's Sunshine, is that what it's called? You know?
Yeah, he's like, I'm not going to see Before Sunset. He's like, I'm going to see
Moonrise Kingdom. Fuck that. Yeah, and he comes out of cinema and he's like, and then I felt an old evil I had not felt for 200 years. So it's like, you only feel that after the cinema? You know, I like to think he was like, oh shit, I feel that ancient evil. I've got tickets for the 8 p.m. Tequila Sunrise. I'll go. The evil will still be there in like 2.5 hours. And he goes to the old house in New Orleans, and it's like, an old house in New Orleans, an ancient evil. I wonder who could be there. Could it be the vampire Lestat who he left in New Orleans in an old house? About the halfway mark of this film? Yeah, of course it is. Of course it is. We all know what it is. This is going to be Tom Cruise again. Who, by the way, as well, gets top billing in this film, even though halfway through the film he's like, bye suckers.
Yeah, top billing, 10 mil, and also a share of the profits. No wonder Tom Cruise was having a riot making this movie.
Fucking some boy. And so Brad Pitt comes in his 80s gear. And to be fair, he's got the ponytail and all that. He does look like an 80s dude. And he comes in and Lestat is sitting there at the piano again. Because there was a whole big thing about Lestat playing the piano, which was pointless. But he's all like, he's even more skeleton-y, and he's like, just been sitting in this house for like 200 years, which is really good because he's still wearing the same fucking clothes. He's still wearing like a frilly fucking shirt from the 1800s or whatever.
In the muggy heat of New Orleans, there's no way that's going to have survived.
It's going to be honking.
Maybe Lestat's like Prince Andrew, and he doesn't sweat.
Oh, I thought you meant that he's a monster. But please, I will not hear anything bad said about our royal family in this podcast. But yeah, and it's like after they left, he's just had like the worst depressive episode in history, where where you're like, I'm not getting out of bed today because everything's rubbish. Well, he's like, well, I'm not getting out of bed for 200 years. It's like, Jesus, man, look after yourself. So he sees Tom Cruise, and Tom Cruise is like, you've come back to me. Absolute like love story. He's like, you've left me. He tried to control him and he escaped, and he's like, you've come back to me. Brad Pitt's like, no, I was away seeing a film. Don't see it. There's not as many sunrises as the title suggests. But actually, I need to explain to you what movies are, because he's been sitting here for 200 years, right? So the Lumiere, you know what? Forget it. How you doing? Just thought I'd pop up and see you for a bit, but I'm away to fuck off again. I'm going to go to San Francisco. And he's like, if you stayed with me, I could have the strength to get out of this house and kill again, basically. He's like, I could leave the house. It's like, yeah, to kill people. And Brad Pitt's like, nah, just thought I'd have a bit of closure here, basically. Really selfish again from Brad Pitt, The whole purpose of this is just to see Tom Cruise once again in his cool, groovy, I'm almost dead skeleton makeup, and worth it. Yeah. And he's like, oh, I'm so pathetic. And Brad Pitt's like, well, I'm out here. And that's his, right, we've caught up. He's back in the hotel room with Christian Slater. He's got his wee tape recorder. It's an actual tape. It's the 90s.
Well, the movie's 2 hours long, so they needed 2 C90s for that.
Aye. Well, he's cutting it fine with 2 C60s. Get the old Dolby noise reduction on that as well. God, beautiful. And Christian Slater is doing the interview, and he's like, holy shit. You might be wondering, why is Christian Slater believing Brad Pitt? Throughout the film, Brad Pitt has shown him like he can move dead fast and do kind of cool vampire shit, and he's like, holy shit.
Here's my dark powers.
And he's like, holy shit, right? So he totally believes him and stuff like that.
Then Christian Slater, like every person that saw this movie and then bought a velvet frock coat and porcelain fangs, Christian Slater has missed the point of the story, where Brad Pitt has just said, being a vampire's terrible. Like, no good comes of it. It's a terrible existence. And Christian Slater's like, yeah, but I know all that, but going to make me a vampire?
Yeah.
And you're just like, no, the point of the story is vampire is not good.
Basically, Christian Slater in this film is like everybody that thinks The Wolf of Wall Street is a story about a cool rich guy that has a fun time. What part of this did you not understand? The whole point of this film is that this guy's an asshole. And Christian Slater is that he's just like, sure, I heard, like, I hate myself and I wish this had never happened. But there also seems like a pretty big upside. And Brad Pitt's like, did you even listen? You don't want this? And he's like, you're right, okay. I've heard for 2 hours about how horrible this is. Christian Slater was like, no, this sounds great. And then Brad Pitt lifts him up, and Christian Slater's like, sure, the dead children and all that sound like a great laugh, but now you've lifted me up a wee bit and got a bit angry. You're right, this seems rubbish. So he's got the tapes of the interview, and he runs out, and he gets in his cool fucking like convertible, puts the tape in, and it's recorded, because obviously he, like everyone else, was like, the vampire's voice is recorded.
Yeah.
He's like, holy shit, I've got this. This is going to be the greatest interview of all time. This is my big break. And he's driving along. And then, what happens, Alan?
Oh, magnificently, Tom Cruise appears looking great and just like gleefully kills Christian Slater and then assumes control of the Ford Mustang.
Right. Yeah, he's taken lessons, obviously. Between the last time we saw him in the 80s.
Exactly, not left the house in 200 years, never changed his shirt, but suddenly he knows how to drive stick.
Between 1988 and 1994, he's went, fuck it, new regime, cars. We don't ever get to see him do a 3-point turn, so I don't know how well he does at that. But what he does do is he bites Christian Slater on the neck while he's driving the car. Tom Cruise jumps into the driver's seat, looks over at Christian Slater and was like, I'm going to give you the choice I never had, which is a callback to, I think he said, to Brad Pitt, which is basically like, do you want to be a vampire? And it's like, oh cool, Tom Cruise and Christian Slater are going to hang out. Maybe the only other more 90s thing than Brad Pitt and Tom Cruise hanging out. And then Tom Cruise like basically cackles. He literally sort of cackles in this scene. And they play a Guns N' Roses terrible version of Sympathy for the Devil as he drives off in a convertible on like the Golden Gate Bridge. Tom Cruise cackling while Guns N' Roses do a cover of Sympathy for the Devil by the Rolling Stones, making this the most 90s thing I've ever seen, and it's fucking great. And Tom Cruise at the end has gone full blown. Like, Tom Cruise in that last scene makes Tom Cruise at the start of this film look like a fucking neo-realist actor. He's like Tom Courtenay or Albert Finney in a kind of, realist British drama compared to the cackling fiend that he is at the end of this film.
Let's round up Interview with the Vampire. It was like a film made for 60 million by Warner Brothers that brings in over 200 million in the box office. You would think that Warner's would leap on the fact that Anne Rice has been writing these books since the 70s and that there's clearly like a massive market for people that want to see this movie, and they don't immediately follow up with a sequel. It seems really odd.
Yeah.
Obviously, this is our Halloween episode, and that was Interview with the Vampire. In terms of a horror movie, because it's vampires, it's a classic of the horror genre.
If we're talking about it being horror, is it scary? I mean, I don't think it is scary, but gruesome stuff happens. It's like Gone with the Wind for emos,
I mean, yeah.
So I wasn't scared, but gruesome stuff happens, like cool gruesome shit.
It's funny you say that, though, because when Tom Cruise was cast as Lestat, Anne Rice said Tom Cruise is no more Lestat than Edward G. Robinson is Rhett Butler.
Nice.
But then once she saw the completed movie, she had to admit she was wrong and called Cruise to say he'd done a wonderful job.
Well, I think she wanted, did she not want like Rutger Hauer or something like that? Something mental like that?
She wanted Julian Sands.
Right.
He didn't have the star wattage that the Cruiser would bring to the project.
I am 100% willing to accept that Tom Cruise has been miscast in this role, because he probably has. I am 100% unwilling to have anyone else play this role other than Tom Cruise, because it's brilliant. These are two things that are coexisting at the exact same time, and I will not change my stance on this. So, would you, over the course, recommend this film?
Yeah, I think if you haven't seen it, you need to see it. If you have seen it, you don't need to see it again.
That's a good way to put it. That's fine.
But it is not, for me, it's not a horror film.
So, guys, this is going to be a two-parter. This is part one, about Interview with the Vampire. And after this great film, success, this weirdness, these big stars, I know what you're thinking. I hope it takes about 14 years or something to make a sequel starring none of the original cast. Well, your prayers are answered. For our next episode, we'll be talking about the much maligned sequel to Interview with the Vampire, Queen of the Damned. And that will be our next episode out in 2 weeks.
I want some more.
Pump up the volume, he's a pirate DJ, and Gleaming the Cube, he's a skateboarder.
He's a skateboarder, yes. Which, by the way, is when everyone ever mentions skateboarding to me is the reason that I always go, you've been Gleaming the Cube, and I have no idea what it means. But that's cool.